My name is Sarah. I'm 30 years old, and I've always been the invisible daughter. 3 months ago, I packed everything I owned and moved to Colorado, leaving behind my parents and golden child brother Jason in Massachusetts. The crazy part? They didn't even notice I was gone. Not a single call or text asking where I was. After years of being overlooked while my parents worshipped the ground Jason walked on, I finally had proof of what I'd always suspected. I was truly invisible to them. Before I tell you how I discovered my own family didn't notice I was gone, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe if you've ever felt invisible too. I wasn't always invisible. My earliest memories are actually pretty happy ones. When I was very young before Jason came along, my parents were different people. My dad would swing me around in the backyard until I was dizzy with laughter. My mom would bake cookies with me standing on a chair beside her, letting me lick the spoon even though the raw dough had eggs in it. Our little Sarah, they'd call me with such warmth in their voices that even now the memory brings tears to my eyes. Everything changed when I was 6 years old and my brother Jason was born. I still remember going to the hospital, clutching a teddy bear I had picked out for him. I was so excited to be a big sister. I had imagined us becoming best friends, playing together, and having all sorts of adventures. "Come meet your brother," my dad said, his voice filled with a kind of awe I had never heard before. I peered into the blue bundle my mother was holding and saw a tiny wrinkled face. "This is Jason," my mother whispered, not to me, but to the baby, as if his name was something sacred. I didn't notice it at first, how the orbit of our family shifted. It was subtle things at the beginning. The way conversations at dinner would always turn to Jason's developments, how he was holding his head up so early, how he started rolling over sooner than the baby book said he would, how his pediatrician said he had exceptional hand-eye coordination. By the time Jason was 3 and I was 9, the pattern was firmly established. Jason wasn't just meeting milestones early, he was showing signs of being truly exceptional. He started reading when he was just 3.5. By 4, he was doing basic addition and subtraction. My parents were absolutely enthralled. "He's gifted," they would tell anyone who would listen. Truly gifted. I was a good student. I consistently brought home B's with the occasional A. But good wasn't exceptional. Average wasn't gifted. And in my family, average had become invisible. In 4th grade, I worked for weeks on a science fair project about the water cycle. I had made a diorama with cotton ball clouds that actually rained when you squeezed a hidden bulb. I was so proud of it. The night before the fair, I asked my parents to come look at my project. "In a minute, Sarah," my dad called from the living room. "Jason's showing us how he can count by 17s. They never did come look at my project. I got a blue ribbon the next day, 2nd place in my grade. When I brought it home, my mom said, "That's nice, honey," and then immediately turned to help Jason with a puzzle meant for children twice his age. That same year, Jason won a mathematics competition for children up to 3rd grade despite only being in kindergarten. My parents threw him a party. They invited family friends, grandparents, even some neighbors. There was a cake with "Our Little Genius" written on it in blue icing. When I turned 16, I had been begging for months to have a small party with my friends. Nothing extravagant, just pizza and movies in our basement. The day of my birthday happened to coincide with a regional chess tournament Jason was participating in. Despite being only 10, he was competing against middle schoolers. "We'll celebrate your birthday next weekend," my mother told me as she rushed around gathering Jason's things. "Jason can't miss this tournament, the whole team is counting on him." I spent my 16th birthday alone, watching movies by myself and eating a frozen pizza I had to cook myself. They forgot to reschedule my celebration the next weekend, or the weekend after that. High school was more of the same. I joined the track team thinking maybe if I excelled at a sport, they would notice me. I wasn't the fastest on the team, but I was consistent, and by junior year, I was made team captain. We had an important meet the same day as one of Jason's academic decathlon events. My parents predictably went to Jason's event. "I'm sorry, Sarah," my mom said, not looking particularly sorry at all. "But this could lead to scholarship opportunities for Jason." I didn't bother telling them that college scouts sometimes attended our track meets and that athletic scholarships existed too. What was the point? My high school graduation was overshadowed by Jason receiving some prestigious academic award for middle schoolers. During the graduation party, my parents reluctantly hosted at our house. All the talk was about Jason's future prospects, despite the fact that he was only 12. I sat in the corner of my own graduation party, feeling like a guest in my own celebration. The only person who seemed to notice what was happening was my Aunt Linda, my mother's sister. She had no children of her own, and she had always taken a special interest in me. "They don't see what they're doing," she told me once, after witnessing a particularly egregious example of my parents overlooking me in favor of Jason. "And that's not your fault, Sarah. It's theirs." Aunt Linda became my lifeline. She was the one who remembered my birthdays, who asked about my grades and my friends. She was the one who took me shopping for my prom dress when my mother was too busy helping Jason prepare for a science competition. By the time I finished high school, I had learned to withdraw emotionally from my family as a form of self-protection. I stopped expecting my parents to show up for me. I stopped hoping they would notice my achievements. I stopped trying to compete with Jason for attention that would never be mine. It was a survival mechanism, but it came at a cost. I carried a deep, unresolved hurt that I tried my best to ignore, but it was always there just beneath the surface. When it came time for college, I chose a school 6 hours away by car. Far enough that I couldn't come home easily, but not so far that it seemed like I was intentionally running away. Though in truth, that's exactly what I was doing. My parents barely helped with my college expenses. They paid for my first semester's tuition and then informed me I would need to take out loans for the rest. Meanwhile, they were already setting aside money for Jason's future education at a prestigious private university. "Jason might get into MIT or Harvard," my father explained when I asked why they weren't helping me more. "That's going to cost a lot more than your state school." I didn't argue. I got a job waiting tables at a local restaurant near campus. I worked as a teaching assistant for intro psychology classes. I took on a summer job as an administrative assistant in the dean's office. Between the jobs and the loans I managed, college was the first time I felt truly seen. I made friends who valued me for who I was, not in comparison to anyone else. I joined a photography club and discovered I had a good eye for composition. I studied psychology partly because I was fascinated by it, and partly because I was trying to understand my own family dynamics. In my junior year, I took a class on family systems with Professor Reynolds, a kind but no-nonsense woman in her 50s, who recognized something in me that I hadn't fully acknowledged myself. "Your analysis of the case study shows remarkable insight," she told me after class one day, "particularly about the impact of parental favoritism on siblings. Is that something you have personal experience with?" Something about her direct but compassionate question broke through my usual deflections. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything about growing up in Jason's shadow. "What you're describing is a classic golden child and scapegoat dynamic," she said when I finished. "Though in your case, you weren't even important enough to be the scapegoat. You were just overlooked." "Is that better or worse?" I asked, trying to make a joke out of it. "Neither is healthy," she replied seriously. "And what your parents have done, whether they realize it or not, is emotional neglect. It's a form of psychological abuse." It was the first time anyone had labeled my experience as abuse. I had always thought abuse meant active harm, not passive disregard. But Professor Reynolds helped me understand that neglect could be just as damaging as more overt forms of mistreatment. She became a mentor to me, encouraging me to explore these themes in my coursework and to consider therapy to address the impact of my upbringing. With her guidance, I began to understand that my feelings of worthlessness and invisibility weren't intrinsic to who I was, but were the result of how I had been treated. I graduated with honors in psychology. The ceremony was on the same day as one of Jason's science competitions. My parents didn't come. Aunt Linda was there cheering loudly when they called my name. Professor Reynolds gave me a hug after the ceremony and told me she was proud of me. Their presence meant more than my parents' absence, I told myself. I almost believed it. After college, I got a job at a marketing firm in Boston. I found an apartment I could afford with a roommate. I built a life for myself independent of my family. I developed a passion for hiking and outdoor photography, spending weekends exploring trails and capturing landscapes that made me feel small in a way that was comforting rather than diminishing. Despite my independence, I still sought my parents' approval in ways that embarrassed me. I would call home with news of promotions or accomplishments, hoping for some acknowledgement, some pride. What I usually got was a distracted, "That's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably turned to Jason's latest achievements. By this time, Jason was in college himself, a full-ride scholarship to Princeton. He was studying pre-med on track to become a doctor. My parents couldn't have been prouder. Holiday visits became increasingly strained. I would sit at the dinner table listening to my parents extol Jason's virtues while barely asking me a single question about my own life. Jason, for his part, seemed oblivious to the disparity in our treatment. He wasn't malicious about it, he simply accepted the excessive attention as normal, the way children often do when they don't know any different. The Thanksgiving, before I turned 29, was particularly difficult. I sat at the table for 4 hours while my parents and extended family talked exclusively about Jason's medical school applications. Not a single person asked me about my job, my friends, my life. I was literally in the room, but figuratively invisible. I left that Thanksgiving dinner with a hollow feeling in my chest that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was something deeper, more fundamental. A sense that in the story of my family, I was barely even a supporting character. I was an extra background scenery in the epic tale of Jason's life. The breaking point came on my 29th birthday. I didn't expect much, I never did anymore. But I thought they might at least call. They didn't. I waited all day checking my phone periodically, telling myself I didn't care. By evening, I gave in and called them. My mother answered on the 4th ring. "Oh, Sarah, hello," she said, sounding distracted. "Hold on a moment, will you? Jason just got his acceptance letter from Harvard Medical School, and we're looking at apartments in Cambridge for him online." I waited, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to my mother's muffled voice as she continued her conversation with my father and Jason, completely forgetting she had put me on hold. After 5 minutes, she came back to the phone. "Sorry about that. What were you calling about?" I swallowed hard. "It's my birthday today." There was a pause. "Oh, happy birthday, honey. I must have mixed up the dates in my calendar. How old are you now? 27? 29? I corrected, my voice flat. "Right, of course. Well, we'll have to send you something. It's just been so busy with Jason's medical school acceptance. Did I tell you he got into Harvard full scholarship?" I tried to steer the conversation to my own news. "I actually got promoted at work last week. I'm managing the entire digital marketing department now." "That's nice, dear. Oh, Jason needs me to look at something. Can I call you back later?" She hung up before I could respond. She never called back. I sat in my apartment that night alone on my birthday, and I broke down. I cried in a way I hadn't allowed myself to cry in years. Deep, body-shaking sobs that felt like they were being torn from some primal place inside me. I cried for the little girl who had never been enough. I cried for the woman who still, despite everything, wanted her parents to see her. The next day, I called a therapist whose name I had been carrying around in my wallet for months. Dr. Miller had been recommended by a colleague who knew pieces of my family story. I made an appointment for the following week. Dr. Miller was different from what I expected. He was younger than I thought he would be, with kind eyes and a direct manner that reminded me a bit of Professor Reynolds. "So, why are you here, Sarah?" he asked after we had gone through the initial paperwork. "I think I'm invisible," I said, and then laughed nervously at how strange that sounded. "Tell me more about that," he replied, not laughing at all. Over the next few months of weekly sessions, Dr. Miller helped me understand that I was still seeking validation from people who had proven time and again that they were incapable of giving it to me. He helped me see that my worth wasn't dependent on my parents' ability to recognize it. And he helped me realize that I had a choice about how much space I allowed my family to occupy in my life. "You can't change them," he told me during one particularly difficult session. "But you can change how you respond to them. You can change the rules of engagement." I was still processing this advice when Christmas arrived. I went home telling myself it would be different this time. It wasn't. My parents gave Jason a new laptop, an expensive watch, and funded a spring break medical service trip to Guatemala. They gave me a $50 gift card to a department store I never shopped at. During dinner, Jason turned to me and asked with genuine curiosity, "Are you ever jealous of me, Sarah?" The table went quiet. My parents looked uncomfortable, as if Jason had accidentally violated some unspoken family rule by acknowledging the elephant in the room. "Why would you ask that?" I replied, my heart pounding. Jason shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like Mom and Dad put a lot of pressure on me to succeed. I wondered if it was easier for you not having those expectations." I stared at him, realizing with a shock that he had no idea. He didn't see how differently we were treated. In his mind, the constant praise and attention were a burden, not a privilege, and my neglect was freedom, not pain. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I had a full-blown panic attack. I sat on the closed toilet lid, gasping for breath, tears streaming down my face. When I finally composed myself and returned to the table, nobody asked if I was okay. Nobody had even noticed I'd been gone for 20 minutes. After Christmas, I called Aunt Linda. I needed to talk to someone who understood someone who saw me. "I can't do this anymore," I told her. "I can't keep showing up and hoping things will be different." "Maybe you need some distance, sweetheart," she said gently. "Real distance, not just emotional withdrawal, but physical space to heal." A week later, a job listing appeared in my email. A marketing director position at an outdoor apparel company in Denver, Colorado. The job description could have been written specifically for me, combining my professional experience with my passion for outdoor activities. The salary was better than what I was making in Boston. The company had excellent reviews online from current and former employees. It felt like a sign. Or maybe it was just good timing. Either way, I applied immediately. I had a phone interview 2 days later, a video interview the week after that, and a job offer the following Monday. They wanted me to start in 3 weeks. I accepted without hesitation. I gave notice at my current job and started making arrangements to move across the country. I didn't tell my parents. I told myself I would call them once I was settled, that I didn't want to distract them from Jason's medical school preparations. But the truth was, I wanted to see if they would notice I was gone. I approached the move like a military operation, planning every detail meticulously. I found an apartment in Denver with a view of the mountains from the living room window. I sold most of my furniture rather than pay to move it across the country, excited by the prospect of starting fresh in every way. There was something freeing about packing up my life in Boston. Each item I put in a box or decided to leave behind felt like shedding a layer of an identity that had never quite fit. I was disengaging not just from my geographical location, but from the person I had been here, always orbiting around my parents' indifference, always hoping for recognition that never came. My last day at my old job was bittersweet. My colleagues threw me a going-away party with cake and thoughtful gifts, a photo album of team events, a gift certificate to an outdoor equipment store in Denver. People made speeches about how much they had valued working with me, how much I would be missed. It was more recognition than my family had given me in years. "We hate to lose you," my boss said, raising a glass of champagne in a toast. "But this opportunity is perfect for you. They're lucky to have you." The drive to Colorado was the longest I had ever undertaken alone, but I didn't mind. I had curated the perfect playlist audiobooks for the boring stretches and the company of my own thoughts. As I watched the landscape change from the dense greenery of the Northeast to the open plains and eventually the majestic Rocky Mountains, I felt something shift inside me. With each mile I put between myself and Massachusetts, I breathed a little easier. My new apartment was in a complex with lots of young professionals. It was modern and bright, with large windows and a small balcony where I could sit with my morning coffee and look at the mountains. I spent the first weekend unpacking and decorating, making the space truly mine. No compromises, no consideration of anyone else's preferences. Just mine. I hung my own photography on the walls, landscapes I had captured over the years during weekend hikes. I bought a comfortable couch in a shade of deep teal that I loved, but would have never chosen if I thought someone else might disapprove. I arranged my books by color rather than alphabetically because I liked how it looked, even though my father had always insisted that was an impractical system. My new job started on a Monday in early February. I was nervous, but also exhilarated. The company culture was exactly as advertised, casual but professional, with an emphasis on work-life balance and a genuine passion for outdoor activities. My team was welcoming and eager to hear my ideas. My boss gave me a clear outline of expectations and then trusted me to meet them in my own way. I joined a hiking group that met on weekends to explore different trails around Denver. I signed up for a photography class at a local art center. I established a routine of weekly video calls with Aunt Linda, who was thrilled to see me taking such a bold step toward independence. "You look different," she told me during our third call after I'd moved. "Lighter somehow." I continued my therapy sessions with Dr. Miller via video calls. He noted the same change Aunt Linda had observed. "You're standing up straighter," he said, both literally and figuratively. It wasn't all easy. There were moments of intense loneliness in those first few weeks, times when I wondered if I had made a mistake moving so far from everything familiar. But those moments became less frequent as I built connections in my new community. It was during my 4th week in Denver that I realized something strange. I hadn't heard from my parents since before I moved. Not a call, not a text, not even an email. At first, I had been too busy with the logistics of moving and starting a new job to notice. But now the silence was becoming conspicuous. I checked my phone to make sure I hadn't missed any calls. Nothing. I looked at my parents' social media accounts. They were active, posting frequently about Jason's medical school journey, sharing articles about Harvard's medical program, posting photos of campus visits to help him find an apartment. Not a single post asking where I was or how I was doing. No indication that they had tried to reach me and failed. No sign at all that they had noticed my absence. The realization wasn't the sharp stab I expected. It was more like the confirmation of something I had always known but had tried to deny. I truly was invisible to them. As weeks turned into months, I found myself settling into a rhythm in Denver that felt natural and right. My apartment began to feel like home. My colleagues became friends. The mountains that had initially seemed imposing became a comforting presence on the horizon, a reminder of the vastness of the world beyond my family's narrow vision. I became particularly close with my neighbor Emma, a graphic designer who had moved to Denver from Chicago a year earlier. She lived across the hall from me, and our friendship began when we both checked our mail at the same time one evening. "You're new here, right?" she asked, smiling warmly. "How are you liking Denver so far?" That simple question led to coffee in her apartment, which led to dinner the following week, which led to weekend hikes and movie nights and the kind of easy friendship I had always wanted but rarely found. "You know what I like about you, Sarah," Emma said one night as we shared a bottle of wine on my balcony. "You're so genuinely interested in other people. You really listen when I talk. That's rare." I didn't tell her that I had learned to listen because no one had ever listened to me. Instead, I just thanked her and poured her another glass of wine. It was through Emma that I met Michael, a wildlife photographer who occasionally worked with her design firm. He was leading a sunrise photography hike, and Emma convinced me to join despite the 4 a.m. wake-up call. "Trust me," she said. "Michael's hikes are worth losing sleep for. And he's single," she added with a wink. I rolled my eyes at her matchmaking, but agreed to go anyway. The hike was challenging but rewarding, and watching the sun rise over the Rockies, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, was a spiritual experience. Michael was knowledgeable and passionate about both photography and nature, offering tips without being condescending. "You've got a good eye," he told me, looking at some of the shots I'd taken. "Do you have any formal training?" When I told him it was just a hobby, he seemed genuinely surprised. "You should consider showing your work. There's a small gallery near my studio that features local photographers. I could introduce you to the owner if you're interested." It was the first of many conversations with Michael. He was different from other men I had dated, attentive in a way that made me realize how low my bar had been set by years of being overlooked. He remembered details from our conversations. He asked follow-up questions about things I had mentioned weeks earlier. He prioritized time with me, rearranging his schedule to accommodate mine when necessary. As my personal life blossomed, my professional life did too. Just 2 months after starting my new job, I was called into my boss's office. "The campaign you developed for the spring collection has the highest engagement rates we've seen in years," she told me. "The executive team has taken notice. We'd like to promote you to senior director and have you take on the fall campaign as well." The promotion came with a significant raise and more creative control. I accepted immediately, feeling a surge of pride that was untainted by the knowledge that no one in my family would care about this achievement. I celebrated my 30th birthday in Denver with a small party organized by Emma. Michael was there, as were several colleagues who had become friends, and a few people from my hiking group. They had decorated Emma's apartment with balloons and streamers, and there was a cake with my name on it. They sang to me, their voices a little off-key, but full of genuine affection. It was during the party, as I looked around at these people who had known me for only a few months, but had shown up to celebrate me, that I had a startling realization. It had been exactly 3 months since I had moved to Colorado. 3 months, and not a single word from my parents. The next day, I received a text from Mrs. Patel, my former neighbor in Boston. "Sarah dear, how are you settling into your new place? Did your parents help with the move? It must be quite an adjustment being so far from family." I stared at the text, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. Mrs. Patel knew I had moved across the country. How did she know when my own parents didn't? They did help. I lied in my response. "How did you know I moved to Colorado?" "Oh, I ran into your roommate while she was moving the last of her things out. She mentioned you had taken a job in Denver." "Such a big change. I'm sure your parents must miss having you closer." I sat with that text for a long time, the implications of it sinking in slowly. My parents hadn't just failed to contact me for 3 months. They didn't even know I had moved. They hadn't tried to call me and reached my disconnected Boston number. They hadn't stopped by my old apartment and found strangers living there. They had made no effort whatsoever to communicate with me, and so they remained completely unaware that their daughter now lived 2,000 miles away. I called Aunt Linda that evening, my hands shaking slightly as I dialed. "Have my parents said anything to you about me moving?" I asked without preamble when she answered. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No," she said finally. "They haven't mentioned you at all recently." "I moved to Colorado 3 months ago," I told her. "They don't know." Aunt Linda was quiet for a long moment. "Oh, Sarah," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," I replied, surprised to find that I meant it. "It's actually a relief in a way. Now I know for sure. I'm not imagining it. I'm not exaggerating. I'm actually invisible to them." "What are you going to do?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "Nothing," I decided. "I'm going to continue building my life here, and I'm going to see how long it takes them to notice I'm gone." Life continued to improve as I embraced my freedom from the constant hope of parental recognition. I threw myself into my work, my new relationships, and my photography with an energy that surprised even me. Without the weight of perpetual disappointment, I discovered reserves of creativity and joy I hadn't known I possessed. My relationship with Michael deepened as spring turned to summer. We hiked on weekends, exploring the stunning landscapes around Denver. He taught me techniques for capturing light and shadow that transformed my photography. I shared with him my love of poetry and my secret dream of someday publishing a collection of photographs paired with poems. "Why is that a secret?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "You're talented at both." I didn't have an answer for him that didn't involve explaining my family's indifference, so I just shrugged and changed the subject. But his question stayed with me, a reminder that dreams didn't have to remain secret, that ambitions didn't have to be tempered by the fear of being overlooked. In June, Michael and I joined a group for a challenging hike up one of Colorado's 14ers mountains, with elevations over 14,000 feet. The climb was difficult, testing my physical endurance and mental fortitude. There were moments when I wanted to turn back when the path seemed too steep or too dangerous. "You've got this," Michael encouraged me when I faltered. "Just focus on the next step, not the summit." When we finally reached the top, I felt a rush of emotion so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. The view was breathtaking, the world spread out below us in a panorama of rugged beauty. But it was more than that. It was the realization that I had done something difficult, something that required strength and perseverance, and I had succeeded. I stood on that mountain peak and let out a primal scream that startled the other hikers, but made Michael laugh in understanding. It was a release, a purging of old pain, a declaration of my presence in the world. I might be invisible to my parents, but I was here, I was real, and I mattered. The following month, I entered a local photography contest on Michael's urging. The theme was self-portrait, which initially gave me pause. I had always preferred being behind the camera rather than in front of it. But then an idea came to me, a concept that felt both personally significant and artistically interesting. I set up a shot in my apartment using mirrors to create a fragmented reflection of myself, parts of my face and body visible in different mirrors, never a complete image. I titled it, "Invisible No More." To my amazement, I won first place. The gallery owner, impressed by my work, offered me a spot in an upcoming group show featuring emerging photographers. "Your self-portrait tells a powerful story," she told me at the opening reception. "Fragmentation, identity, visibility, and invisibility all captured in a single frame. It's remarkable." I accepted her praise with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Someone saw meaning in my work. Someone understood what I was trying to express. Someone saw me. It was exactly 4 months after I had moved to Colorado that my phone rang with a number I recognized instantly. My mother. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. After all this time, why was she calling now? Had she finally realized I was gone? I answered on the 4th ring, mirroring how long she had made me wait on my birthday. "Hello." "Sarah, thank goodness I caught you," my mother said, her voice as brisk and distracted as ever. "I need your help with something important." "No, how are you?" "No, I've been trying to reach you." Just straight to what she needed from me. "What is it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "We're planning a celebration for Jason's white coat ceremony at Harvard Medical School, and I need you to help with the arrangements. It's going to be quite an event. We've invited family from all over the country, plus some of the faculty. Jason's going to be the youngest in his class, did you know that? The youngest to be accepted to Harvard Medical in 15 years? I listened to her go on about Jason's accomplishments, about the party plans, about how proud they were of him. Not once did she ask about me or my life. "So, anyway," she continued, "I need you to come home next weekend to help me with the preparations. There's so much to do, and your father is useless with this sort of thing, and Jason is so busy with orientation activities." "I can't come next weekend," I said simply. "What do you mean you can't come?" "This is important, Sarah. This is your brother's future we're talking about." "I can't come because I live in Colorado now," I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. "I moved 4 months ago." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What are you talking about, Colorado? Why would you move to Colorado?" "I got a job here, a good job. I'm a senior marketing director for an outdoor apparel company now." "But why didn't you tell us?" She sounded genuinely confused, as if the concept of me making a major life decision without consulting them was incomprehensible. "I wanted to see how long it would take you to notice I was gone." I said, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. "It's been 4 months, Mom. 4 months, and you haven't called once. You didn't even know I had moved across the country." "That's not fair, Sarah. We've been very busy with Jason's medical school preparations, and you know you can always call us. When I do call you, put me on hold and forget I'm there. Or you talk over me about Jason. Or you rush me off the phone because Jason needs something." "That's not true," she protested, but without much conviction. "It is true. It's always been true. I've been invisible in this family for as long as I can remember. Everything has always been about Jason. Always." "That's ridiculous. We love both our children equally." I laughed a short, bitter sound. "No, Mom, you don't. You never have. And the fact that you didn't even notice I had moved 2,000 miles away just proves it." My mother was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to put your father on the phone," she said finally, her voice tight. My father came on the line a moment later, his tone already defensive. "Sarah, what's this nonsense your mother tells me about you moving to Colorado without telling anyone? That's an incredibly irresponsible thing to do." "I'm 30 years old, Dad. I don't need your permission to move. And I didn't tell you because I wanted to see if you would notice. You didn't." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We've been calling your apartment." "No, you haven't," I said firmly. "If you had, you would have discovered that my number was disconnected months ago. You would have gone to my apartment and found out from the new tenants that I had moved. You would have called Aunt Linda or my friends or my old workplace to find out where I was. You did none of those things because you didn't even try to call me. Not once in 4 months." "This is ridiculous," my father blustered. "We've been busy with Jason's medical school preparations." "You're always busy with something related to Jason. There's always some reason why he needs all of your attention and I get none. It's been that way since he was born." "That's not true. You're just jealous of your brother's success. I'm not jealous of Jason, I said, realizing as I spoke that it was completely true. I'm sad for myself. Sad that I spent so many years hoping for recognition from parents who could never see past their golden child. Sad that it took moving across the country for me to finally accept the truth about our family. My father made a dismissive sound. You've always had a flair for the dramatic, Sarah. If you want to play the victim, that's your choice. But don't expect us to indulge it. Before I could respond, there was a commotion on the other end of the line, and then Jason's voice came through the phone. Sarah, is it true you moved to Colorado? Yes, Jason, 4 months ago. Wow, I thought you were just really busy or something when you didn't come to Sunday dinners anymore. Why didn't you tell anyone? I did tell people, just not Mom and Dad, because I knew they wouldn't notice I was gone, and I was right. There was a pause, and I could almost see him processing this information, trying to reconcile it with his understanding of our family. They've been really focused on getting me settled at Harvard, he said, a note of uncertainty in his voice. They've been really focused on you my entire life, Jason. That's the point. Another pause. I never realized. I know you didn't. It's not your fault. You were a child accepting the family dynamic you were born into, just like I was. The difference is that the dynamic worked in your favor and against mine. My mother's voice came back on the line. We need to have a family meeting about this, a video call, so we can all see each other and sort this out. I agreed to a video call the following evening. When I hung up, I felt drained, but also strangely liberated. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my truth to my parents without filtering it through the fear of their disapproval or dismissal. The video call the next day was as difficult as I had expected. My parents sat side by side on their living room couch, my father looking annoyed, my mother teary. Jason sat in a chair to the side, his expression troubled. I think we need to clear the air, my mother began. Sarah, your father and I are hurt that you would move across the country without telling us. That suggests a breakdown in family communication that concerns us deeply. I laughed incredulously. A breakdown in family communication, Mom. There has never been real communication in this family. Not about anything important, not about feelings or needs or wants. The only communication that happens is about Jason's achievements and needs. That's simply not true, my father interjected. We've always been there for both our children. When? I challenged. When have you ever been there for me in a way that wasn't an afterthought or an obligation? When have you ever prioritized me over Jason? When have you ever shown the same interest in my life that you show in his? My parents exchanged glances, clearly struggling to come up with examples. You missed my college graduation because Jason had a science competition, I continued, my voice gaining strength. You forgot my 29th birthday entirely. You've never once asked about my career beyond the most superficial questions. You didn't even notice when I moved across the country. We've been very busy, my mother said weakly. You've been busy my entire life, I replied. Too busy to see me, too busy to value me, too busy to love me the way parents should love their children unconditionally and equally. Jason spoke up, then his voice hesitant. I never realized things were so unbalanced. From my perspective, Mom and Dad were just being supportive of my interests and goals. I didn't see how that might be coming at your expense. Of course you didn't, I said, softening my tone slightly. You were a kid, Jason. Kids accept the reality they're presented with. I don't blame you for any of this, but I need Mom and Dad to acknowledge the reality of how they've treated me all these years. My father shifted uncomfortably. I think you're exaggerating, Sarah. All parents have different relationships with each of their children. That doesn't mean we love one more than the other. Actions speak louder than words, Dad. And your actions have consistently shown that Jason is the priority, the favorite, the one who matters. I'm an afterthought at best, completely overlooked at worst. The conversation continued in circles for over an hour. My parents alternated between defensive denial and reluctant partial acknowledgments. Jason remained mostly quiet, occasionally asking clarifying questions that suggested he was truly trying to understand the family dynamic from my perspective for the first time. By the end of the call, nothing was resolved, but something had shifted. I had spoken my truth clearly and without apology. I had named the invisible patterns that had shaped our family relationships for decades, and in doing so, I had claimed a kind of power I had never possessed before. I need time, I told them as the call was winding down. Time and space to figure out what kind of relationship I want with all of you moving forward. I'm not cutting you off, but I am setting boundaries. I won't be coming to the white coat ceremony. I won't be available to help with party planning. I'm building a life here in Colorado, and I need to focus on that right now. My mother looked wounded. My father looked annoyed. Jason looked thoughtful. We're still your family, Sarah, my mother said plaintively. Yes, I agreed. But being family doesn't give you the right to treat me as less than. It doesn't obligate me to accept being invisible. From now on, if you want me in your lives, it has to be as a full and equal member of the family, not as an afterthought. I ended the call, feeling both drained and somehow lighter, as if I had put down a burden I had been carrying for too long. The months following that confrontation were a time of profound healing and growth for me. Dr. Miller helped me process the complex emotions that surfaced after finally confronting my parents. We worked on establishing healthy boundaries, addressing my deep-seated fears of abandonment, and building self-worth that wasn't dependent on external validation. What you did took tremendous courage, he told me during one of our sessions. Many people never find the strength to name their pain so clearly, especially to those who caused it. I maintained limited contact with my family during this period. Brief occasional phone calls with my mother, who made awkward attempts to ask about my life, but still inevitably steered the conversation toward Jason. Short, stilted emails with my father, who never directly acknowledged our confrontation, but stopped dismissing my feelings quite so readily. And surprisingly heartfelt texts with Jason, who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me as a sister in person independent of our parents' influence. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he wrote in one message. About growing up in my shadow. I feel terrible that I never noticed. I was so caught up in trying to meet Mom and Dad's expectations that I didn't see what was happening to you. His awareness didn't magically fix the past, but it opened the door to a possible future relationship between us that wasn't defined by our parents' favoritism. Aunt Linda remained my most steadfast family support. I'm so proud of you, she told me during one of our weekly video calls. You've done what I never had the courage to do with your mother. You've broken the cycle. 3 months after our confrontation, my mother asked if she could visit me in Denver. I was surprised by the request, but agreed, setting clear boundaries about the length of the visit and expectations for how we would spend our time together. She arrived on a Thursday afternoon, looking smaller and older than I remembered. I showed her my apartment, my office at work, my favorite spots in the city. I introduced her to Emma and to Michael, who by this time was officially my boyfriend. I took her to the gallery where my photography was being displayed as part of the group show. I had no idea you were so talented, she said, standing in front of my self-portrait. Why didn't you ever tell us about your photography? I did, Mom, I replied gently. Many times. You just didn't listen. She was quiet for a moment, looking at the fragmented reflection of me captured in the photograph. I see it now, she said finally. How we made you feel. Broken up into pieces, never whole. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of the years of emotional neglect, but it was something. A crack in the wall of denial she had built around our family dynamic. The visit wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences and moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there were also glimpses of a possible new relationship, one based on who we were now, rather than the roles we had played for so long. My father was slower to come around. He maintained that I was overreacting, that all families had their issues, that I was being too sensitive. But even he eventually had to acknowledge that something had been fundamentally unbalanced in our family. "I never meant to make you feel less important," he said during a phone call after my mother had returned from her visit. "Jason just needed more attention. He was special." "All children are special, Dad," I replied. "All children deserve to be seen and valued for who they are." He had no response to that. Jason, to my surprise, became an ally in my efforts to establish a healthier family dynamic. He began declining some of the excessive attention and praise, redirecting conversations to include me, insisting that my accomplishments be acknowledged alongside his own. "Did Sarah tell you about her promotion?" he asked during a video call that included all four of us. "And her photography being featured in that gallery show. That's pretty amazing, right?" "My parents caught off guard," murmured agreement. It was a small moment, but significant. As I continued to heal and grow, my relationship with Michael deepened. He was patient with the emotional work I was doing, understanding when family issues left me drained or upset, supportive of my boundary-setting efforts. "You're the strongest person I know," he told me one evening as we sat on my balcony watching